Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising on the We Act Radio Network, on TuneIn's Progressive Voices Network, and on the Union Edge Radio Network. I'm so glad you're listening, and some of you are even watching, because we are right here at Netroots Nation, which is a fabulous conference where leaders from all over the country get together and figure out how to make our nation work better. And right now we have Melanie Levin of the National Women's Law Center. She is a superhero for justice. She is here with us right now. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here because recently in the headlines we saw 17-year-old Jensen Walcott got fired from her job at a pizza place in Kansas. Now, why would we care about a pizza place in Kansas and this 17-year-old getting fired? Well, we care because she got fired after she asked could she make the same amount of money as her colleague who have the same qualifications, was even hired on the same day, everything the same except one thing, and those would be her lady parts. She is a lady, she is a girl, she is a woman, and she wanted to get equal pay with a guy. And in 2016, we are still having this fight. Now, I would like to give a shout out to Jensen for asking, because Jensen isn't alone. We know that the stats on unfair pay are appalling. So I want to welcome you, Melanie, and I want to give you a moment to share the terrible, awful, very bad stats so our listeners can cry.
So we know that women and moms and women of color all make less money. Women across the board make 79 cents to every dollar man makes. But we know for women of color it's worse. We know for moms it's worse. We know that it has existed for so long, and that the wage gap isn't close to being closed. And this is just one prime example of the fact that it just lives on, and it lives on from day one. And this is a 17-year-old and who's at their first job and really had a wake-up call, and her story made national news because it was so atrocious. I mean, it was like she was hired for an hour and got fired, which is just so sad. It must be so demeaning to her and demeaning to other girls she talks to and other boys she talks to. It just seems so out of touch with where we are today in 2016. This shouldn't be happening, and so that's why the story blew up. But we know that it happens. It's very common, which is why we have such a bad wage gap.
We have a horrible wage gap, people. Horrible, very bad, and awful. And I'm going to share some of the numbers. So Melanie shared that 79 cents to a dollar is the U.S. Census average of what women are making to men. But when you pull up the hood of the car and look at what's going on underneath, that is horrifying. And we know that moms are making about 73 cents to the dollar, and that women who are moms who are African-American moms are making about 53 cents to the dad's dollar, and Latina moms are making only 47 cents to the dad's dollar. And so we have the compounded hits of both, racism and sexism, to be totally blunt.
And we know that trans women can barely even get in the door, and that their numbers of employment are abysmal, and that there's a number of states that don't protect workers for LGBT status. And so there's so many different layers of discrimination. On top of that, we know women with disabilities have very low employment rates. And so all of these compounded just result in a lot of lost income for women and their families, and it just makes the economy weaker, and it makes women struggle, and it makes children suffer, and it doesn't add up to the American dream.
And I have to tell you, you already know this, Melanie, so I'm going to share with our listeners, that is that when you have more women in leadership, more women in the labor force, businesses prosper. A Pepperdine University study that went over 20 years of all Fortune 500 companies, all 500 of the Fortune 500 companies, found that the more women in leadership in those companies, the higher the corporate profits across every measure. So more women equals more money. So women are judged more harshly. We know that, for example, in studies, moms are taken off the management track for fewer late days than non-moms. We know that with equal resumes and job experiences, so with pieces of paper, that moms are hired 80% less of the time than equally qualified non-moms. I mean, it's ridiculous amounts of discrimination, but we all lose because not only do companies make more money when they have women in leadership, also women make the vast majority of purchasing decisions in our consumer-fueled economy, so nobody's buying anything when they don't have money to spend. So we have to have solutions, and Melanie is here to talk about solutions. I have a small confession. I wish there was a silver bullet single solution. There is not. This is complicated. We need lots of solutions. What are your top 3?
Oh, gosh. Okay, thanks. All right, so I think that it's really important for girls in school to be supported in order to be able to go into any field that they dream of, including the high-tech fields, including fields that are dominated by men. We know that there's lots of barriers to women getting into male-dominated fields, and we know that those fields pay more. We also have to pay women more for the caregiving fields that they are in, and that means that we need to raise the minimum wage. And we need to make sure that women have protections when they get pregnant. At some point, the majority of women at some point will get pregnant while working. And it's a shame for the United States to have so many policies that women don't feel like they can continue in the workforce and can continue to grow in their jobs. So other than minimum wage, up the minimum wage, make sure that women have access to whatever career and dreams they want to fulfill. My daughter wants to be a police officer. That's like her thing. Last week it was like Supergirl, and this week it's a police officer, and next week it will be president, but like whatever she should dream. And that really gets back to representation. Women need to see, girls need to see that they can be anything. And so that's key. And then I think the third thing is we need to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. It's been
pay transparency.
Kristin and I have been working on the Paycheck Fairness Act for at least 10 years.
100. It feels like 100. I'm not 100 yet, but it does feel like 100.
And it's just way overdue. We got really close a couple of years ago, and it's the bill is very complex, but it's because the wage gap is a complex issue, and it just needs to pass.
It needs to pass
now.
And it needs to pass both the House and the Senate. So listeners out there, this has been so close. At one point, the Paycheck Fairness Act, it passed the House. And then, in the next session, it passed the Senate. But they did not pass in the same session both houses, which you need to actually move forward. So that was very sad, but also bodes well for keeping the pressure on.
Right.
This is a don't give up moment. It's close. And what this would do is it would protect people like Jensen Wolkett, who was fired in Kansas, because it says you can ask about how much you're being paid. In many companies, they have policies like this pizza company, where if you ask about how you're being paid, they flat out fire you. That's not okay. Also, something that you brought up earlier, which is really important, is that the younger generation, they share everything. They're like on social media, they're Instagramming, they're Snapchatting, they're doing all kinds of crazy things that I don't even know what they are. Pretty soon people are going to be sharing stuff on Pokemon Go, probably sharing, and we can't be having people being fired for comparing their salaries. And I have to have a moment. I'm having an actual soapbox moment. I would like to announce this. And that is that it's ridiculous that we can't share how much we're being paid. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's what happens is who suffers is the employees, right? So the employers benefit when the employees are held in the dark, when they're when they're told not to talk about their pay, when they're told not to talk about their benefits that they receive. And then, it becomes like a whisper campaign. And that's ridiculous in this age of technology in 2016. And that's why the younger generation that shares everything and anything, it's just, I'm not surprised that a 17-year-old talked to another 17 or 18-year-old and shared how much they were getting paid at a pizza shop. I mean, it seems just like it's a non-issue, which is really what our policy needs to catch up to be. I mean, it shouldn't be an issue. It's your information. It's your own. It's your news. Like, you can share your own news.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Plus, it helps managers double check their own accidental discrimination. This is Melanie Ross Levin of the National Women's Law Center. Go to the National Women's Law Center, get involved, get engaged, be part of the movement. They are amazing, and they're moving mountains for women, for children, and for families. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you.